Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you are all having a great day. This is my 200th video, and in honor of that, I'm starting a new show called This Week in Movies, wherein I kind of recap the entire week's movie news, go over the box office, and tell you the films coming out this week. And really, it's gonna be a guerrilla kind of video, if you will, because in most of my other videos, I tend to edit the audio and cut out a lot of things and do reshots and retakes, if you will. But really, that's not the case here. I will be talking about all of the news and no edits, very casual, if you will. If you look at the time codes on the screen right now, you can tell that there are several stories I'm going to be delving into, and you can skip ahead to any particular time code if you want. At the end of this show, considering it's the first show at least, I will be giving shout outs to a lot of my favorite and a lot of my friendly YouTubers, if you will. So, without further ado, welcome to This Week in Movies. And the first story that we have is, of course, arguably the biggest story, that Ben Affleck has been revealed, if you will. I mean, we knew he was Batman, but the first image of him as Batman has finally been released. And I made a video on this, and I'll leave a link to that in the description down below. But really, to me, this is just an image. There's one side of it wherein I say that this is just an image, and it doesn't give you enough to tell you, okay, Batman versus Superman, or whatever this film will be called, will be great. But at the same time, there's another side to it, wherein I say that it makes me certainly more positive. Because the thing is, we know that Batman will look good, and his suit, there's some observations about the suit that I have. I mean, of course, it looks like that of The Dark Knight Returns, and also, to a certain extent, Batman in the Arkham games. But really, to me, what I loved about it was the largeness of that particular bat symbol on his chest, because it gave me the sense of what I believe is a slightly more unafraid decision. That, you know, the studios seem to be making more afraid decisions when it came to Man of Steel in terms of the costume, in terms of a lot of the designs and everything throughout their production. But in this case, it feels like they are going for something different. They are going for something that exists within their own universe, and they're not afraid to go to different places. I'm someone who did not like Man of Steel at all, so I'm looking forward to Batman in this film, of course. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's an image, and we can see Ben Affleck having gained a lot of bulk, which is a good thing. Of course, he needs it for the role, and I also said that from this image alone, the first thing that struck me really when I saw it is that I got the impression that this could be the first iteration that we have of Bruce Wayne, less so Batman, but more so Bruce Wayne from Batman, the animated series. Now, the next story we have is the second trailer for Interstellar. Well, technically the first official trailer, if you discount the teaser, of Interstellar has been released. It was released before Godzilla, which also has an interesting story later on that I'll get to, but this trailer is fantastic. I mean, I don't know where to begin to tell you how excited I am for Interstellar. Apart from the fact that, you know, everything Christopher Nolan has done, including The Dark Knight Rises, in my personal opinion, is just fantastic. I've loved all his films to date, and in my personal opinion, they've been getting better and better and better. And you could argue that, oh, you're a Nolanite, blah, blah, blah. You know what? You can call me that, but at the end of the day, I am a fan of films, and I'm a fan of his films, and I'm looking forward to this. This film, to me, judging by the trailer, of course, seems to be near infinite in scope. And again, I did an entire review on this, which I'll leave in the description below, but really, looking at some of the images in this film, especially when it comes to them in space, it gives you the sense that this is going to be something special. And there's a moment wherein Matthew McConaughey is talking to his daughter, and he says, "I'm coming back," and it fades out, and then it shows you the space shuttle taking off, and the music kicks in, and it gave me this weird sense of, you know, an old Spielberg film, if you will, which is interesting because the script is originally actually written for him, but at the same time, it gave me the sense of something that can and probably will be a special and, I believe, fantastic film. Again, it's a trailer, so there is always caution. I have been fooled by trailers before, but at the same time, I can't wait. That's it. That's all I have to say. I cannot wait to see Interstellar. And The next story that we have is of Guardians of the Galaxy. A new trailer was just released. The original trailer pretty much rocked the internet because everyone fell in love with Hooked on a Feeling. Everyone fell in love with, you know, the general visual style of the film. But this trailer really gives you a much greater insight into this. And much like the Interstellar trailer, what I liked was that if you take a look at the Interstellar trailer, just to backtrack for a second, you get one shot of Anne Hathaway and one shot of Jessica Chastain, who are in fact the second and third build for this film. And I mean, looking at that, they didn't reveal an awful lot. And even in this Guardians of the Galaxy trailer, as much as they've shown, they haven't revealed an awful lot. And that's what's fantastic, because you get to see Chris Pratt, and as a fan of Parks and Recreation, I really have understood the kind of man that Chris Pratt can represent or is going to get typecast as, especially after this film, because they give you a bit of an extended thing where a lot of people have, where basically are about to capture him, that he's at gunpoint, and when he tries to talk his way out of it in this extremely silly yet almost enthusiastic and energetic manner that I believe Chris Pratt has displayed in a lot of his other roles, is something that I'm certainly looking forward to. Furthermore, you get the feeling that you're going to have a bunch of five outlaws. But these five outlaws are going to be outlaws with a heart. Because when I see this trailer, there's a particular moment, especially with Groot, where he slowly peers onto this kind of cassette player, clicks on it, and right after that, Hooked on a Feeling starts playing, which again, it's a cue for what the song that people just fell in love with, head over heels with. And, it felt so real to me, that moment, and you get to see Dave Bautista as Drax the Destroyer speak. You get to really get a great insight into all these characters, especially Rocket Raccoon, who surprised me in this trailer, because he doesn't sound an awful lot like Bradley Cooper, which, I mean, credit to Bradley Cooper. I mean, he's done a great job, of course, being a little more versatile in terms of his voice. And there's a moment where Rocket Raccoon is in fact itching his private area, and I have to say that gets me so strangely excited into the kind of film that they're making, more than anything else. Now, into the next story that we have, and that is about Godzilla. Godzilla made $196 million worldwide in its first 3 days, $93 million from the US alone. So, of course, Warner Brothers decides to say, you know what? We're making a sequel. Most often nowadays, when it comes to big franchises, the sequel is announced way, way in the past. Captain America 3 was announced before the release of Captain America 2, which can come across one of two ways. One is a bit arrogant, but at the same time, one is a bit confident. There's a fine line to that. But in this, it looks good because they've seen the success of the film. The fans are raving over this film. I personally enjoyed it. I can't say I was head over heels, but the word of mouth is very positive about this film. And I think that, a Godzilla sequel in this universe and in this extremely realistic and relevant universe, it's something that I would definitely be looking forward to. The next story we have is about X-Men and the Fantastic Four. The first story is about X-Men and the Fantastic Four regarding a crossover. Writer-producer Simon Kinberg spoke of the possibility of a crossover with the X-Men universe and the upcoming Fantastic Four universe, which is coming out March 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And really, I don't want that to happen, and it's a good thing that Simon Kinberg doesn't say that it's likely to happen either, because his specific reasoning was that the current X-Men universe has never really acknowledged the existence of these heroes, and in fact, the way I see it is, the current X-Men universe has really ostracized, big-time ostracization of the mutants and those with powers, so I don't believe that, one, it's a smart move from a studio perspective to have this story that's been running for 14 years, since the original X-Men to, Days of Future Past, and maybe even down to Apocalypse, to have that mesh in with a world of Fantastic Four where the heroes are far more worshipped. I don't think that'll work unless, of course, they have a different take on it in the reboot. But now, you have the reboot coming out 2015. It's going to be a fresh take. You have to see if that's successful, of course. And apart from that, the world that's been set up in X-Men, I don't know if that could really mesh with any other kind of world, especially a Fantastic Four world. And this particular X-Men, the Hugh Jackman, Ian McKellen, Patrick Stewart X-Men, could actually end up finishing with Apocalypse, which brings me to my next story that I find interesting, that they've sort of announced that Gambit is going to be played by Channing Tatum. Now, Channing Tatum is talented, so that's fine by me. I mean, he's done a lot of different roles, and I can't determine now whether he'd be good or bad as Gambit. Of course not, but I can tell you this, that potentially he could be, as any actor could be. It's silly of me to say, but potentially he could be great as Gambit. But the thing is, they say that they're going to be introducing Gambit in X-Men Apocalypse, which is rumored for a 2017 release at this point. And that's interesting. That means that this current X-Men universe is not likely to end for a while. So it gets me thinking the possibility of a Fantastic Four X-Men crossover might not even happen with the rebooted Fantastic Four. Maybe when both the franchises are rebooted very close to one another, then it may be a possibility. And also another thing that I wanted to mention, for those few of you that like X-Men Origins Wolverine, I'm not one of them. I recently revisited the film. I am not one of them at all. It's unfortunate that it feels far less a part of the continuity now, considering the fact that Taylor Kitsch is being recast, and it's not like Taylor Kitsch was bad. He was fine. It's just they recast him just because they wanted to disregard the film altogether, which I find a bit unfortunate, especially if you're a fan of that film. The next story we have is about arguably one of 2015's biggest releases, Jurassic World. We had John Williams composing for the original Jurassic Park films, the first and the second, of course, and also the Star Wars films. And now, considering both are coming out so close to one another in the same year, that is 2015, you can't exactly have John Williams do both. So John Williams probably went for Star Wars, and Michael Giacchino was initially probably disappointed. He's like, I can't work with JJ. I've always worked with JJ Abrams. You know what? The studio calls him up and says, we're going to cast you for Jurassic World, because that's what's happening. And it's not a bad thing, because, for example, Don Davis took over the composition for Jurassic Park 3. So they have already switched composers, if that's a particular argument on someone's part, which I don't necessarily think it is. But at the same time, Michael Giacchino, if you look at his body of work, I mean, he's done films like Star Trek Into Darkness, Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol, and he won an Oscar for Up. So there's two things that I want to bring up from that. One, that you can see a great degree of versatility. That, Mission Impossible and Up, they have vastly different scores. But at the same time, what exists in those four films is the fact that he manages to add two things. One is this continuous pace through music. A lot of people credit pace of a film just to editing, while of course editing is the prime aspect of pace. You do have things like writing and stuff, but really music plays a great degree. It plays into the pacing of a film. So in that sense, those three films are fantastically paced. One, and secondly, the sense of adventure that you get from those films, while different, is certainly heavily existent. So I think that potentially, once again, Michael Giacchino could pull off another one of his masterclass scores. The next story we have is about Marvel's Agent Carter. Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a fantastic show, according to some people, and to me it's fine. I find it enjoyable. I can't say I'm head over heels for it, though I'm almost done with the first season, and I watch it less so because I'm in love with the show, but more so actually just because it's a Marvel property today, And I guess, there's a bit of nostalgia with Coulson, and I'm looking for those hints to the cinematic universe because I'm a huge fan of the cinematic universe, of course. And now this is the second TV series that they're planning, and Agent Carter, to me, conceptually itself, it's fantastic. It's a period piece TV show, one thing. I mean, those, for example, like Boardwalk Empire, or even Game of Thrones to some, those have proven well. They work well if you're looking at it from a ratings perspective. Secondly, the synopsis really delves into the character of Agent Carter. Captain America: The First Avenger was such a character-centric film, And whatever you got to understand about her, she was a confident and bold woman. At the same time, now we're gonna witness her after she's lost the love of her life, after World War II is pretty much finished. We're gonna witness her in that kind of a stage. But at the same time, if you watch um, the Marvel one shot, the short films that they have on their, DVD and Blu-ray bonus features. Go to the one on Iron Man 3. You could probably find it online, called Agent Carter, directed by Louis D'Esposito, who should also direct Marvel film, in my personal opinion, but that's a later discussion for a later time. But really, if you watch that, you get such a good take of the character. And to me, if the show is anything like that, it'll be fantastic. To add to that, it's currently an 8-episode season, as confirmed by Haley Atwell, the lead actress, which to me is a little disappointing because, you keep seeing this argument all over the internet. We want more female leads and this and that. So it's going to lead to all of that, which is just pointless in one sense. Secondly, I think that while period pieces tend to be constrained in a certain way, they actually do have a lot more flexibility, come to think of it. So it's a little disappointing that it's only going to be 8 episodes, but I guarantee you, considering you have the Marvel brand, considering the fact that this character can be executed well, and I'm also hoping to see Dominic Cooper portray Howard Stark, that, Agent Carter, if it picks up, if the Nielsen ratings are high enough, you could see this run for seasons and seasons on end, something that I'm personally really looking forward to. The next story we have is about Middle-earth, pretty much, but more so the Lord of the Rings, because of Viggo Mortensen. Now, for those of you who don't know, Viggo Mortensen was one of the main characters in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and really, some of the statements he's made recently, I have a couple of issues with. He said that Peter Jackson has sacrificed subtlety for CGI, and he said that The Fellowship of the Ring was his favorite film of the three because shooting it was the most fun, and it required the least amount of CGI. And later on, shooting the next two films, he thought it was a mess. He thought there were too many reshoots and blah blah blah. And thinking about it for a second, he said that he was hoping Peter Jackson would go back after The Lord of the Rings to more practical things in terms of, like, for example, a film like Heavenly Creatures. It has more practical effects, so he thought Peter Jackson would go back to that, but really that's not the case. He then goes on to say that he did King Kong and The Hobbit and even The Lovely Bones, which had a $90 million budget. So he basically went against Peter Jackson and the kind of route that he's been taking. Now, the two issues I have with this. One, I don't think that even a studio, while, Peter Jackson, at least from what I can tell, is passionate about the stories he wants to tell. He wants to be as true to the material and at the same time make an entertaining movie, which I believe he has done successfully 5 out of 5 times so far. We see the final Hobbit film, let's hope for the best. But, to say that he's using CGI, CGI is required in all kinds of films. And to tell these kind of stories, you do need CGI, but especially in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, now the Hobbit trilogy, a bit of an argument can be made. I can agree to that. But in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I believe that there's a great degree of practicality, and CGI was, while it was very abundant, it felt sparingly used. And I don't think that if you have these massive scenes like Minas Tirith with just millions of people fighting, there's no practical way to do that. The reason The Fellowship of the Ring was perhaps Viggo Mortensen's favorite film is because it was, in scope and scale, relatively the smallest. The others had far bigger fights and things that could not be done, and I think if there were a better way than CGI to do some of those scenes, Peter Jackson, who is a man of, such talent, would have figured out those ways and done it, because he has looked for the best of ways to make these movies that he has. He really has. He's broken bounds in terms of technology, in terms of motion capture with Gollum. So that's one thing. Secondly, why? Why is Viggo Mortensen saying this pretty much 11 years after the release of the final film? It's been 11 years. And more importantly, it may disappoint some fans, to hear one of the lead actors to go against a film he was a part of. But really, to me, it's these are perhaps his most successful films, one thing, and to be a part of this adventure, if you go back and watch any of the special features, he is beyond pleased. I have never seen any kind of an issue from his perspective, and he gave his all to the project, and I believe Peter Jackson did as well. So it's a little confusing that he makes these statements now, but I mean, they've been made, they're being talked about. I'm here to just fill you in a little bit, give my opinion, and a couple of facts as well along the way. The next story we have is about Spring Breakers 2. Now, if you haven't seen the original Spring Breakers, I recommend you watch it. Personally, while the content of the film might be a bit too lurid for some, it doesn't exist just to be lurid. It exists to give this kind of an interesting message about the generation, if you will. It is a very unique film. It is a great film. It's a film that I really liked, but I did have a few problems with it. There's no denying, but it's a film that had one of last year's, if not last year's, best performance. That was of James Franco, and there's a sequel to it. Now, before I get into the story, you would think, oh, Hollywood's just making sequels of everything, but this is a unique case because James Franco has in fact spoken up against it, saying that he and Harmony Korine, the director of the original, have nothing to do with the sequel. This sequel is called Spring Breakers. The Second Coming is directed by someone called Jonas Akerlund and is written by Irvin Welsh, who had nothing to do with the original film. None of the cast, practically none of the crew are returning. So it's just a sad, sad way of profiting off a relatively, well-received title. And a title that actually did pretty well. I mean, if you look at the kind of film that it is, and it's got that relatively independent sense to it, it grossed quite a bit of money in that sense, so I understand why they're doing it, but frankly, to read something that James Franco said, he's basically trying to preserve the artistic integrity of the original film. And I believe that that is something that these current makers just do not realize, that they could get sued, that they could get bashed by people, because Spring Breakers, while not everyone saw it, the few people that did, it created a bit of a cult, if you will. Like, I guarantee you, 5 to 10 years from now, Spring Breakers will turn out to be a cult film. That's the way I see it. It's a film that is misunderstood today, but in the future will definitely, maybe become clearer to some, will be viewed by more people, and it's a film that I think will stand for a little longer than more people seem to expect. The next story, and perhaps one of the final stories we have today, is Family Guy and The Simpsons. And this is arguably one of the biggest events for television, at least animated TV. Family Guy is entering the 13th season. The Simpsons is entering the 26th season. A couple of images were released wherein there's a crossover episode called The Simpsons Guy. That is pretty awesome. I mean, the images that have been released, you have Stewie wearing Bart's clothes, skating, and Bart is also in the image, and you have one where Peter Griffin and Homer Simpson are fighting, and it's later mentioned in the synopsis, they're fighting and arguing over over what is the best beer in town. It says that Bart and Stewie will be bonding. It says that Lois and Marge will take a day off and go off bonding as well. It also says that Lisa and Meg will be bonding. But what I found interesting was, and this struck me after I read the synopsis, that they never mentioned Chris or Maggie. And I believe that, well, I don't want to ruin it for you if I haven't seen the episode, of course, but if this happens to be that, they're gone for most of the episode, and at the end, you see them weirdly bonding, like, how you have, like, the last 2 minutes of the sitcom. In that sense, in this kind of episode, it could end with both of them kind of there together, but I'm a little confused about one thing as to which universe this is going to be a part of. Is it going to be part of Family Guy's 13th season? Is it going to be part of The Simpsons 26th season, or both? Is it going to air as a part of both? Because, another thing I found interesting was when the Griffins go to Springfield, The Simpsons meet them and greet them as their albino friends, which is, I mean, that kind of humor itself, the two worlds are so vastly different that the possibilities are endless. So it's exciting to see, and to add to that, this could break Nielsen records. I can go to the extent to say that a Family Guy Simpsons crossover, while from a, once again, viewership, ratings, Nielsen perspective, it hasn't been particularly high recently, it has the absolute potential to really break some records if marketed right, because this is a crossover that these two shows have had such a strange rivalry almost. Like you have people who are, oh, I'm a Family Guy fan, or oh, I'm a Simpsons fan. You rarely find a person who loves both shows, but they acknowledge the existence and the positives of each show, but really you have people who pick sides. So to have this kind of a crossover because of Fox, the studio, of course, it's gonna be monumental, at least to the fans, if not to the world of television, and it's gonna be something that I certainly would not miss out on. Now that we're done with our stories, let's take a quick look into the box office, typically over the past weekend, but maybe we delve a bit further back. First of all, we have Godzilla. As I mentioned earlier, it opened to 93 million, the second highest opening weekend of 2014. In fact, ahead of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I mean, that just shows how important a thing like word of mouth is. Because I can tell you, I can guarantee you, Godzilla, compared to, as a brand, comparative to Spider-Man, should not be holding much of a candle. Not at all. But it's been getting better reviews. There's been greater word of mouth. That is why Godzilla has almost made 200 million at the worldwide box office in 3 days and is on its way to breaking $500 million by the time it ends its run, maybe 600 million, and it's the perfect reason for the studio to greenlight the sequel so damn soon. The next film I want to talk about is Captain America the Winter Soldier. While it fell to number 8 this weekend, making about $3.7 million. Worldwide, it's made 703. Domestically, it's 250, so it's the second highest grossing film of the year so far. It's just 3 million behind the Lego Movie. It could beat the Lego Movie, and if you look at its competition throughout the year, there isn't too much. Maybe Days of Future Past, maybe The Hobbit, maybe Interstellar, maybe Guardians of the Galaxy for all we know. But come to think of it, it's going to be one of the highest grossing films of the year, and it came out so early, so it's a success nonetheless, irrespective of its release date, because it's made 703 worldwide, and its domestic take is pretty solid, once again proving to The Amazing Spider-Man just how important word of mouth is, because The Amazing Spider-Man has been plummeting at the domestic box office. It dropped to 10 million in its third week? For a film like Spider-Man, those aren't solid numbers by any means, and I've re-evaluated my opinion on the film. While I do think it's enjoyable, I would not watch it the second time. And that's the thing. The studio went into such heavy marketing and tried to create this universe that it kind of got lost with the general perspective of making a good film that connects with people. Take a look at Frozen last year. Take a look at Gravity last year. Unknown brand, not even brands at the time. Why were they successful? They connected. Frozen made over $1 billion. Why? Was it based on a comic book from the past? No, not at all. It was a film that connected and had positive word of mouth and good reviews. And personally, if there were studio notes, they were good ones. That's just how I see it. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 has made $172 million in the US alone, which is still a lot. It's going to break the $200 million mark by the end of its run. Foreign territories is where it's doing well. Worldwide, its total is 633. I predicted earlier on, before the film's release, that it could ultimately break a number like 845 million, while it could fall short by probably 50 million. 800 million is still within sight, so it's still a success, but I have my worries about the third film, at least from a box office perspective, because franchise fatigue, it's a term that's thrown around a lot, but it's really, really kicking in for The Amazing Spider-Man. The next film I'm going to talk about is Neighbors. It opened to almost 50 million in its first weekend. It's made 146 million worldwide. I mean, look at that total. That's already more than This Is the End after having been in theaters for like 10 days. It's got 250 there. It should make $250 million worldwide. It deserves to. It's a fantastic, hilarious film in my personal opinion. It's a film you should watch if you haven't. And the last film is $1 Million Arm, a film that I saw that, okay, it's heartwarming, but really, it's distributed by Disney, so it should be doing well. And it opened to number 4 with $10 million. The foreign total will be a lot more. I think by the end of its run, 25 to 30 million could be possible for $1 million arm, but Disney's a pretty intelligent distributor of films. So worldwide, I mean, 100 million is not, it's not a stretch for me to say, but I definitely don't think that it is so within reach at this point. I think looking at 60 to 70 million by the end of its run seems pretty rational. Now we're going to take a quick preview into what we have releasing on May 23rd, that is Friday. The first film I'm going to quickly gloss over, if you will, Blended. I mean, let's be honest. Adam Sandler over the past few years has really, people say, oh, The Wedding Singer is his best film. Well, the director of The Wedding Singer is back for Blended, so that may be a positive sign to some, but really, I haven't really enjoyed too many of his films, especially recently. Like Jack and Jill and That's My Boy were completely trashed in terms of reviews. So, in that sense, it's not a film that is set to do so successfully, but the current reviews say that it's not that bad, but it's just like an okay shrug your shoulders kind of experience, which again, it's an Adam Sandler film, so it will do pretty well at the box office considering Grown Ups 2 beat Pacific Rim, something to this day I'm disappointed by, and now I'm hoping that Godzilla in its second weekend defeats the Sandler movie just because. But I mean, of course, I don't hope for any film to not do well because, there are jobs and livelihoods at stake, and I completely understand that. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to do well for the prime reason that it's releasing against X-Men Days of Future Past. This is arguably one of the most anticipated films of the year. It's combining two massively loved universes that exist in the same universe, which is it's unique again. It's different, and it's definitely going to outgross all of the older X-Men films. I can say that at least. And the current reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, over 90%. IMDb, I mean, of course, IMDb now after its release will plummet pretty much, but to have 9.3 out of 10 now from your first 5,000 or so reviews is no easy job. It is no easy task. And it's something that gets me a little more excited, though of course I am apprehensive because to me, look, when I look back at all the X-Men films, First Class was my favorite. I just reviewed it. I'll leave a link in the description for that as well. But really, if I look back at the old films, X-Men Origins is not great. The Wolverine is a genuinely good movie minus the last 10-15 minutes. X-Men 3, a lot of people hate. I kind of enjoy it. But now you have to look at the Bryan Singer films, really, because Bryan Singer helmed the first two X-Men films, and he's helming X-Men Days of Future Past, a film that I'm actually hoping would have been directed by Matthew Vaughn, but that's not the case. And X-Men 1 is a film that I really do not like. I'm sorry to say. I know there are people out there that love it. I do not like X-Men 1 at all. X2 was better. It wasn't spectacular by any means, but it was a better film. It was a genuinely good film, I can agree. So I'm apprehensive because of the man helming it, because even his work in the past, he's done like Valkyrie and Jack the Giant Slayer, things that haven't been particularly well received or enjoyed by me at least. So come to think of it, it's a film that I'm looking forward to, but I have that extra bit of caution. I don't want to go in and walk out extremely disappointed. I always keep my expectations out of my head before going into a film, but the current situation is trailers look great, combining one of my favorite universes, that is the First Class universe, and that set of characters I hope they are more focused on as well, which I'm not exactly sure of just as yet, combining them with an older universe that has had its positives that I've enjoyed. The potential is endless. Time travel is something I love. X-Men Days of Future Past is the film that I would go for this weekend without a doubt in my mind. Now we are to the end of our show, and to have recorded almost 34 minutes non-stop, it's no easy thing, and I realize there are a lot of pauses and a lot of things where I kind of stutter, but that's the idea. It's supposed to be guerrilla style, and I want to give a quick few shout-outs to people that have really kept me going, because this is my 200th video. I've hit a little over 470 subscribers. I'd love for you to subscribe. If you tuned in the whole way, man, you have patience. Really, this. I hope that this becomes better as I go along. But I have so many people to thank. a lot of friends and a lot of, people who've inspired me generally. The first friend really I want to thank is 22 Tiger Dude. Check out his channel. The nicest guy on YouTube is 22 Tiger Dude. It's not even an opinion at this point. Even if he has something negative to say about a film, he says it in the nicest possible way. His insight is brilliant. If you're a SpongeBob fan as I am, you check him out because man oh man, he does so many videos about SpongeBob, and really he reviews every major film. He does so promptly. He will respond to your comments. He comments on all my videos. I love him, and check him out. He's great. The next guy is Marvel DC Fans Reviews, who is a man named Colin who I've recently interacted with. I saw him do about a 3.5 hour Google Hangout with someone the other day, and I said if he can do 3.5 hours, I hope God's given me enough to make me go at least 30 to 35 minutes. So he's not only a fan, he's extremely intelligent when it comes to film. The insight he provides is great, and in fact, he's such an interesting guy to listen to. You have to check out that channel as well. Furthermore, I mean, of course, I will give shout outs to, the bigger channels that inspired me to get onto YouTube. You have your Jeremy Johns and your Chris Stuckman, but there are a few channels that inspired me to take this podcast route. Well, this isn't exactly a podcast, but to make this a long, unedited kind of route. The first is probably and primarily the Schmoes Know, and their podcast, their 2-hour-long podcast that comes weekly, is by far one of the most entertaining things I've ever heard in my life. They have inspired so many people. I could not tell you, I don't even know where to begin when it comes to them, They've done so much for the film community itself, and through their podcast, they've done that, and I wanted to try and replicate that. I'm being honest. I have some original ideas, but I also want to try and do certain things that a lot of other people have. Furthermore, if you take a look at Pretty Much It, they were the first long kind of weekly roundup news show that I ever started watching, and I haven't missed a show in the past year and a half, probably longer. It's entertaining, it's informative. There are 3 of them, so it goes by a little quicker, or actually a little slower because there's more discussion, but in the sense that there are no long pauses or breathlessness as I'm feeling. But, of course, the prime inspiration, the one that made me, that kind of ticked something off in my head and made me say, I have to do this. AMC Theaters. One of the most informative shows anywhere, let alone film, any field, one of the most informative shows. John Campea and everyone on that show, John Schnepp, who I'm a big fan of, by the way, they've done a lot of great stuff, and, they do it daily. There's commitment to that I respect, and in fact, I'm starting to absorb their way of speaking and emphasizing because I just listen to them so often, so they're an inspiration. But really, these few YouTubers, the past 3 I just mentioned, they're extremely big. They're not going to be watching this video. I wanted to talk about some more of my friends, and if I miss you out, please comment below. I'm sorry, I'm delirious after talking for so long, and I'm definitely going to mention you in next week's show, and I'm going to try and do this every week after the box office numbers have been announced, probably release it on a Tuesday. It seems the right day to do it. And of course, I want to mention, Daniel Dowdy, Joseph Akers, Tevya Smolka, Michael101591. So many people that have been with me for over a year. It's unimaginable. Did you really like my reviews that much? I mean, I haven't been particularly proud of some of my early stuff. I can tell you that. It's not stuff that I'm particularly proud of, but the fact that you saw something in me that's made you stick around for this long is fantastic. Even Terrence Page. It's been a while since I've spoken to him, but I watch his reviews every time he's got a new video. I respect him. He's got such a great input, and there's so many of you that I haven't had the opportunity to interact with as much as I've hoped, just because this gets really busy after a point, and ultimately the content is, it's the prime thing. I can interact with you. The community aspect of it works and is important, but I want to try and put up the best possible content I can, and I believe that the This Week in Movies thing, this is the first step. I guarantee you it's going to get better as I go along. I'm going to try and make, greater things and more adjustments to this, and I certainly want you to comment below with any suggestion that you might have. But really, I want to thank each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart. This is the next step of my channel. I hope to improve on it, and until next time, this is Mr. Film Jack.